time to grow with the SEO Queen. Receive the perfect leads like never before. No traffic is gonna explode. It's time to grow.
Welcome to the Jazz and Tech Lounge with Lady Z, a podcast about the secret to success in technology, music, and business on Bashani Radio, iHeartRadio, and iTunes. Bashani Radio, always talking about everything from New York City. You can listen to the Jazz and Tech Lounge with Lady Z on any mobile phone or tablet device through the Bashani app or through major podcast distributors, including iHeartRadio, iTunes, and Google Play. Welcome to the Jazz and Tech Lounge with Lady Z, where we explore tech and enjoy the music while learning the secrets to success in music and technology. Please follow us online on our website and social media at Lady Z, ladyz.com, and all social platforms at LADYZHE. Today is Saturday, May 30th, and my next guest is an author, speaker, a mother, the catalyst, and a very dear friend of mine, Dr. Deena Brown. I'm holding in my hand the book, Testimony, the anthology, The Journey of Me on the Road to I Am. And I want to share a little bit about Dr. Deena Brown. She is just such a phenomenal educator. She's traveled the world, lived overseas, and she's a mother. One of the things that we both have in common is that we're both mothers of black sons, of melanated sons. And I want to discuss today. I just want to discuss, as a business leader, how do we deal with institutional racism? How do we build companies that are inclusive and effective and seek the best in and for both the organization and the people within it? So without further ado, I want to welcome none other than the fabulous Dr. Deena Brown. How are you today?
I am great. Thank you for having me. It is such a pleasure and an honor to sit down and have this conscious conversation with you. I love all things jazz and tech and all things that Lady Z, because whatever you seem to put your mind to and work on, it's been phenomenal. But more importantly, as we speak to institutionalized racism, and how do we begin from a leadership perspective to make sure that the vision, mission, and values of the organization truly align to the fact that they're inclusive of all people? How do we do that? We do that by having conversations like this.
Right. Absolutely. And, I think it is definitely a true fact that the hearts and minds and spirits of many in this country right now are extremely heavy, and heavy with the weight of the exhaustion of an absence of justice. When you look at, so many names, but most recently George Floyd, his untimely demise at the hands of a cop, a police officer, which we expect to protect and serve. So what are your thoughts about this whole situation?
First and foremost, it's tragic and unsurprising simultaneously. And I say unsurprising because when you have a nation that's built on the premise that another human is less than and not human, it's going to come to the surface. It's going to bubble to the surface. And when we look at the laws, when we look at our leadership, and we look at how decisions have been made historically in regards to African Americans in particular, there's a trend, there's a pattern. So that's when I said it's not surprising. Mm-hmm. I think we get comfortable and complacent because we see progress. We've had a black president. Woohoo, we've changed. We have arrived. No, we haven't. Look at what President Barack Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama had to deal with in entering office, being called gorillas and baboons and men, and felt comfortable. Here's the part. Not that they were just able to do it, it's freedom of press, but they felt comfortable. Where historically had you ever seen a president and the first lady attacked publicly in the media, in the news, by other politicians, senators, representatives, and media?
Based on how they look.
Based on how they look.
Right.
And so that's why I say unsurprising.
So I want to back up a little bit, because this is the Jazz and Tech Lounge, and we do talk about this from a technological business and entertainment perspective. So Diddy came out a while ago and has said that, because he's in the entertainment industry, he has said that, the politicians cannot take the electorate for granted. And then on the business side, Byron Allen just went to the Supreme Court, and they ruled that he did not prove effectively that he was a victim of racism.
Right.
How do you respond to that as an entrepreneur, as a business professional, whether you're black or white, when the data clearly shows the disparities?
Yeah. Again, it's like a statement of the obvious, but it's so unobvious, is that it's embedded. It's embedded in our media. It's embedded in, even our access to technology. Yeah, this is shows about business and technology and access and all of it. But also, let's look at how the media is used to prove or disprove, and doesn't even need to have to have all the facts in that.
Right.
And that I want to speak to, Diddy speaking out, of course, is fantastic, but I want to talk about how music is a unifying agent, okay? They say it's the language of love, right?
Right.
But even within our music is villainized. Depending on whatever message that those that aren't, part of the culture, so to speak, wishes. So we would take hip hop or rap or anything else, and it's also elevated to a whole other level of hate culture. Mm-hmm. So now we have our music, which is villainized, right? Now we have the access to technology, which is controlled. And here we constantly have to prove our innocence, and it has to be validated, usually by a white person. And if our music is okay, and again, I'm not heavily into the music side and all of the tracks like you guys are, but think about this, is that for long periods of time, unless you had a quote unquote Grammy, your music wasn't good enough.
Right.
I'm just
Yeah, I mean, Jay-Z and Beyonce have voiced their opinions on the Grammys, and they have, in fact, stated, I think it's in their song Ape Shit, Jay-Z has a verse on there talking about how he doesn't need the Grammys to fill a stadium.
Right.
He doesn't need the Grammys to validate his art. So I think that's one of the reasons why Tidal was a platform that was started to empower other artists who weren't getting the respect or the play or the money that they wanted. I mean, the music industry has a history of artists, prolific artists, dying penniless because there's the institutional racism and degradation of them on the money side happens consistently. So how can business professionals see this institutional racism and start to dismantle it so we have a more equitable playing field?
Wow. Institutionalized racism is just that it's part of an institution. And so you have to, the same way it was built, one brick at a time, you have to begin to dismantle it one brick at a time. And to begin to dismantle it, it starts with the consciousness that it actually exists. Far too long, to make it feel good for many of us, we ignored and said it's not real. We don't have these open conversations about race, class, and culture and disparity. And that any particular time that we have some movement forward, then we say, see, we're healed. But we don't really get to the deep part of the wound. So that's why I say you have to begin to pull it back layer by layer, brick by brick, because that's the whole point of an institution. Okay, Rome wasn't built in a day, neither was racism. It's right. A learned behavior. It's a learned behavior, which also means it can be unlearned.
Right.
And you start that by having conversations around what do I know personally about race? What do I believe? Not what I believe because it's socially correct, but what do I believe? And what have I been saying to myself and others when the lights were off? Not when they're on you, when the camera's on you. What have I been saying when they weren't? How many jokes did I laugh at? How many times did I actually poke fun because I said it was all in fun? Well, we all know your brain doesn't sleep. So what have you been embedding into your psyche?
Right.
It impacts how you see. So it's one thought at a time. It's one conversation. It's one word at a time as we build and construct, and we start with our youth.
Right. I was at a forum because this is phenomenal news. There was legislation passed last year that made it illegal to discriminate against anyone based on their natural afro hair. And this legislation, the Crown Act, became law January 1st, 2020 in the state of California. Many other states are adopting laws like this. And I think it's really powerful. I was at a forum discussing the Crown Act, and a young man expressed his frustration with how he's systematically and consistently marginalized in the workplace. And, you know, to the people who are listening, who may be a W-2 or those who are doing the entrepreneurship thing, what do you have to say to them when they're navigating the waters of marginalization in institutions?
That's a very tricky and slippery slope. And I say that because of the embedded systems and the fear that exists that if I speak up, I'm going to lose my job. And if I lose my job, I can't feed my family. If I can't feed my family, and you see, there's that pattern. And that's been part and parcel to how we've done business in America for forever. So many times, people who are marginalized, particularly, again, African Americans and other minority ethnic groups, be quiet, and they silence their voice so that they can feed their families. And now we're talking about, again, psychological safety. We're talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, is that, you know, as long as I'm okay, as long as I can just feed my family. So if you're in the workspace, and there are certain companies that have put into place mechanisms to share when they're feeling that way. But I will say, because I actually experienced this personally, is that they often don't work. I filed a discriminatory case against my employer. I then was harassed and continually bullied. I then filed and requested for whistleblower protection. And I was unprotected. Okay? By the very people who were put into place, their job was for me to report to them that what was happening to me and that I would get protection, and that I was told after I produced a preponderance of evidence and emails and notes and everything, and was still told my case was invalid. Invalid. Even when those in power and place admitted to certain aspects, I was still told my voice, my case was invalid. Can you imagine how a person would feel? So I don't have a specific answer for those people that are in those places because it depends. It's situational. And the only thing that can truly, honestly, 100% protect you and cover you is to be your own boss. It's to not be in a position. You can go and go after legal representation and go after them in the court of law, but if you don't have the money, again, your hands are tied again. And if you don't have a large case that's going to get national, global attention, many times even the groups like the NAACP and the Urban League, they're not going to, the Jewish Defamation League, they're not going to jump on unless it really has ramifications, large-scale ramifications to impact change globally. So, again, we're back to how do I use my voice? And back to your original question, and my answer still remains is that it depends. What is your company culture like? What I would say is that on the journey that you would document, you would write down, and you would address. But if you don't feel safe, then look for an exit because maybe you don't belong there. Take your gifts somewhere where they can be appreciated and build a strategy, an exit strategy. I'm not saying quit, walk out, now your family is starving and now you're overwhelmed because there's so many additional layers to that. And that I wish it was a simple answer. I wish I could say, okay, here's what you do. You go to HR, you go file a complaint, the complaint's going to go and you're going to be good. But I know this to be a lie. So, with this being a lie, the only thing I can do is to be aware, be conscious, and then create systems where that you can put yourself in a place where you don't have to feel marginalized because you have a choice. Even though people are acting and doing, everything that happens in your life, good, bad, and different, you have a choice. You have a choice to feel marginalized or not. You have a choice to feel empowered or not. Everything is about choice. So when you're in that situation and you're looking to your supervisor, your boss, your manager to save you or validate you, the one thing I can tell you that you can do and that you have the power to do is to make a choice to know your worth and know your value. And then once you are concrete in that understanding and that knowledge, then you make a plan to put yourself in an environment, a secure environment, whether that's entrepreneurship or another organization or company that will value you, so you can live the life that you dream and desire.
Now, you said something that really resonated with me is, just knowing your worth. And I think that knowledge, knowing your worth, is so powerful, so powerful. I can think of the time where I built this company up from nothing to $500,000 in recurring revenue a year, more than that, just my book of business. And I would get these emails from the owner on the weekends, basically telling me that I'm not, selling good enough. I'm not doing well enough. And after I asked him for a raise 3 times, I quit and walked away. And as I was walking away, he wanted to negotiate. He wanted me to consider staying. And when I left, I replaced my income with less clients in a matter of months. And how, I had the nerve or the courage or the desire to walk away from many situations. That's one of many situations I've been in, working for other companies that I felt did not value my worth or what I was bringing to the table. So I just walked away. How can other people in similar situations be empowered to go the entrepreneurship route or overcome the fear of, leaving an organization?
Oh, great question. Because it all starts with the plan. It all starts with strategy.
Okay.
And the beauty is that we now live in a technologically advanced world that you can do that, right?
Right.
So it talks about technology and using technology, and that there are, and people think, well, it costs money. No, there's lots of free tools out there to get started. And so don't wait till you're in crisis mode and you are kicked out the door to begin to take the steps to build that foundation for you to delve and to transfer into an entrepreneurial lifestyle. Because I'm going to tell you right now, it's not easy. Okay?
Right.
No, it's not easy. And it's not for everyone. Okay?
Right.
It can be rough out in the entrepreneurial street.
Right.
But on the flip side, it can be also very rewarding. And now, think about this. You have this amazing podcast platform. And you're able to invite guests on, but you're also able to share what you know. And if you have a specialized knowledge, and I think that we all have a giftedness in one area or another.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can begin to think and ask yourself questions, what do I know that people want to know? And then transfer that into now monetize it.
Right.
So whether it's a Q&A, whether it's a podcast, whether it becomes an ebook, whether it becomes a course or program, whether it becomes a consultation, and you first have to begin to take a look at, and this is what I had to say to myself in the beginning, quit giving away your gifts that was given to you for you to prosper. Okay?
Wow.
And so that's huge.
That is huge. And, I could think of when I was a W-2, when I was working for other companies, there's been so many times where I knew that my time was limited there. I could tell that they were looking for a way, or a reason, give me a reason to leave, or the situation wasn't right, any of those things. So I think that's awesome advice for people to develop a plan on how to get themselves out of those unfavorable situations.
And then also get into an ecosystem of growth.
Mm.
And I say that who you surround yourself with is important. Who you learn from matters. So I founded the leadership movement in 2017 to help shift the way that we think about ourselves and women and how we learn, experience, apply, and develop, primarily by getting out of our own heads so that we can lead and do these things.
Right.
And so that movement in itself began to create and help and support other women as they started to, again, get out of their heads so that they can lead. And that led to me also then creating the Facebook group, the Leadership Collective, which is in the process of developing into entrepreneurial incubator, especially for women who are in positions and do want to make changes, and they do need some support and help, and they don't know what to do.
Right.
So it's one step at a time. It's like having the idea, the movement, yes, and then fine-tuning it, creating the group, and now what's coming up in July is Futurecast. How do we think into our future? So what I definitely want to encourage
And although it's called Futurecast, and the whole concept is about women helping women begin to think bigger, bolder, and begin to implement and put in place strategies to live the life they dream and desire, that what we're going to speak about is universal truth. But I want to be transparent, saying this is designed for women. Women to think that we have a unique way that we think, a unique way that we do things, and we have certain unique ways that we grow and we learn. And so the whole summit, the virtual summit, the 3-day virtual summit, is designed for women. And so part of that is to help think about the infinite possibilities. There are infinite possibilities out there. So one thing that I definitely want to make sure that I share, and what we will also be delving deeper into in Futurecast, is that let's start with what you can do instead of what you don't have and are unable to do.
You know what? That's such a powerful thought, because, you know, when I think about my mindset, you know, throughout my career, you know, when I graduated from MIT, I was like, man, I was ready to conquer the world. I was like on the fast track at Raytheon. I was working hard. I was in a place that valued my talents. And then years later, when I got more degrees, more accolades, more experience, I found that I was not valued as much. And that definitely affected my self-esteem. And I went through, you know, a depression. And I think, you know, in 2012, I finally decided, you know, something has to change. So I decided to strike out on my own. What can people do to cultivate a healthy mindset?
Oh, that's my specialty.
In the midst of all this.
And that's this mindset mastery. And I've been on this journey for some time, and it's a beautiful journey to really look at from a neuroscience perspective. And I love to say, if you know, then you can grow and you will thrive. Okay? Is that you've got to know who you are and where you are today. Who are you today? Let's pull back the layers. And during this COVID crisis and COVID situation was a perfect opportunity for people to get quiet and get clear about who they are. Because once you're clear about who you are, you can become very confident about what you stand for and what your messages are. And now you can become consistent about your actions. And that cycle is a continuous cycle as you move into new situations and seasons, and you have to seek a new level of clarity for what you're due to do and what you're called to do in that season, in that situation. And so what I say the first piece is to ask yourself some hard questions. And my favorite hard question, grab your pen, grab your pencil. And if you use the question, just go ahead and give me credit, because I'm going to tell you this is a game changer question. Ask yourself right now, where and what is the lie in your life? And what are you willing to sacrifice to live your truth?
Where and what is the lie in your life?
But the other part is, that part is hard, and you're going to kind of run around, you're going to chase it, you might get up and get a cup of coffee, you might decide to go bake some biscuits. Because then the second part, which is really the part that hits you, is what are you willing to sacrifice? Ego, money, what? Time to live in your truth.
I'm writing this down. So when I think about that question, I'm going to tackle the second one. The second one is a little bit easier for me to wrap my mind around. What are you willing to sacrifice to live in your truth? The first thing that comes to mind is other people's opinion of my choices. My professional choices, I should say. I do have a moral code that I do abide by. And I do care what people think on that tip. But when it comes to my professional choices, I'm willing to sacrifice caring about what other people think.
Okay.
And I say that because I've been told that I need to just focus on being a good digital marketer, or focus on just being a good violinist, and just focus on that. But, and this, we've had this conversation years ago about the synergy of my gifts and walking in that synergy with no apology. And that's one of the things I'm willing to sacrifice.
Wow. And that's huge. That's huge. And here's the thing is that, so when you unpack the question, which is, what are you willing, or actually, let me back that up. The question is, where or what is the lie in your life, and what are you willing to sacrifice to live in your truth? And when you unpack either portion of that, whichever portion you're most ready for, because you might find that there's multiple lies. So I always say, start with the one that's going to lead to you unpacking the next one. Because change is a challenge, but transformation is truly even takes a lot more out of you. And so that's where a lot of the sacrifice has to come in. And so as you were sharing that, you're willing to, sacrifice what you're looking to other people to, you didn't use these particular words, but to validate you.
Right.
That's huge. That's powerful, because that's the place to start. And to take that to the next level, and you asked me, how do we get people to start to get out of their heads?
Right.
How do we get people to start to move in the midst, and what I call to be unstoppable in a sense?
Right.
Is that once you realize, and once you delve into the fact that it is not other people stopping you, it's you stopping you. And sometimes you create the own drama,
right,
in order to self-sabotage yourself, because what you believe and think about yourself.
Right.
So you've got to begin to believe and think differently about yourself.
You know what? And I want to add to that, because I noticed my business really started growing once I got out of my own way and stopped expecting success to happen a certain way. I think being committed to the process, being committed to the ultimate goal is good, but being flexible on each step there from where you are to your desired place is critical.
It's not just being flexible. It's giving yourself grace. Okay. It's giving yourself grace. And I define flexibility a little bit different than grace. Because that flexible piece, meaning like kind of like you can kind of bend, you can kind of move, but grace says you can forgive you. Grace says you can forgive yourself for whatever it is that you're holding against yourself. And so this is some of the work that I have begun to do about myself. And I realized, okay, if I'm going through this and I'm experiencing this, and once I started to open up and share pieces and tidbits of that, I realized that I'm not alone, because what we like to set ourselves up to believe is that it's only us.
Right.
So we self-sabotage again because we don't share. So I committed to beginning to share my journey and embrace that my journey and my awakening to my I am. And that's what you referenced earlier, testimony, the journey of me on the road to I am.
Right.
What is my I am right now in this season? And that's the power piece. And so it starts with, what do you believe about you? I ask clients all the time, and this stumps them. I said, what do you believe about you? I don't want to hear what they said. What do you believe about yourself? And that was the hardest question they had to answer, because it can be very ugly about what you have been speaking into your own spirit.
Yeah, like you said, shut up, heifer.
You know about heifer, girl. You know about heifer.
Shut up, heifer.
Shut Up Heifer. I said, I'm going to have to drop everything and finish this Shut Up Heifer book because it is so relevant.
Oh, I can't wait for that to be done. But,
It is so relevant.
You know me, I'm a scholar, I'm a reader. And when I read about, these black professors and millionaires in the 1900s, and, I'm reading about this, about, what's going on even in the midst of Jim Crow and slavery and everything else. And I have to ask myself, what is it different about their mindset in the midst of everything they were dealing with?
They believed that they could, so they did. And they believed that they could, and so they did. And they were in a position that they didn't have a choice. It was do or die. And when you get in that position of do or die, or
right.
like our recent answers would say, well, you get sick and tired of being sick and tired, you'll do something?
Right.
You have that. Yeah, some that probably embodied that mindset.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then you have the ecosystem in which they found themselves, in which were nurtured. There was no such thing as you couldn't.
Right.
It was, how do I figure it out? Here's how we can.
Right.
So it goes back to this learned behavior, this learned helplessness, this learned disempowerment. It's a learned thing, but you also can unlearn it. And when I was in college, first started college, I said, I always knew I wanted to get a PhD. I said, I'm going to get a PhD one day. And I said, I want my dissertation. So meaning as an undergrad at San Diego State, I had started conducting these interviews for my quote unquote dissertation research. That was your
right.
job. And I wanted to look at the impact on desegregation on African American teachers and leaders, et cetera. Not just the kids, but also the adults. Because what you didn't realize is that 90% of who held the community and the idols and the role models in the community lost their jobs with desegregation.
Oh, wow.
Okay. They did not take black principals and teachers and whatever who often lived in the community in which their students went to school, right?
Wow.
They didn't take them to those white schools.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They lost their jobs.
Wow.
And so you have a bedrock of the community. Now they don't have a job. And now you're also placing children in a hostile environment where they came from being in an environment with a teacher and an educator that says you can, you will, and I'm going to be here with you standing in the gap to help you get to that.
Right.
And I'm going to call your mama. I'm coming over to dinner. Yes, we're not going to let you.
Right.
To now, I don't care how smart you are, that you're still dumb, you're stupid, you got to go sit outside the classroom door and get what crumbs I give you, and I hope you fail so you can prove what I believe about you. Now you're pouring that into a child. Okay, so when we talk about this learning, okay, when we talk about this learning, and having kids grow up, and this is not the distant past. We're talking about 50 years ago, 60 years. We're talking about today.
Right, right.
Okay? And I say we're talking about today, and I'm getting a little bit worked up about this, is because I found out later, which is why I'm not in jail right now, is that my son's math teacher said to him in the class where he's the only chocolate dot, "Are you sure you belong here?"
Wow.
Because he didn't do so well on the quiz. In front of the classroom. He's never recovered. And he struggles. His math tutor's like, I don't understand. He gets it. He knows it. Well, I don't know why you are hiring me, because he knows it. But what happens to him when he's in the class and he has to take a test? Or he's in the classroom with that teacher?
It's a traumatic environment.
Okay?
Yeah.
And goes so fast, so he believes he can't do math, when the fact is no, he has to slow down and employ his steps. And again, like I said, paid for a tutor, had him back. They're like, no, he knows math. He knows this stuff. He knows the process. He's very clear on all of that. He was very clear, but he wasn't confident in his ability, and so therefore he couldn't consistently show up. And so again, I call it my C3 blueprint. You've got to have all three: clarity, confidence, and consistency. And if one's missing, you're going to have distortion in your life.
Right.
So that can be applicable across every area. So our mindset, our business, and creatives, especially high creatives, musicians, artists, etc., are constantly asking someone else to validate their gift, and they attach that validation to how many sales they get,
right,
how many shows they can do,
right,
how many rounds of applause they get,
right,
and downloads. And so the love that they have for their gift and the passion that they have for their gift, in a sense, is energetically, vibrationally watered down by their fear of not being accepted.
Mm.
Okay? So, what do? This is the Jazz Tech Lounge, right?
Right.
So I wanted to kind of bring all that together.
Right.
And I want the listeners to see there's an intersectionality with all of this.
It definitely is.
Okay? How you think about yourself, how you respond instead of react to others' opinion of you, okay? And placing yourself in a market or in the market where you can optimize and maximize your gifts. And the optimization is going to come when it goes back to you doing what you love, being very passionate about it, being very integrous, being very confident, and being consistent about how you show up. And guess what? Here's the spoiler alert. You're not for everybody. Ain't everybody going to love you. They just
right.
not.
Right.
In life, in leadership, or in music. Everybody's going to love you.
Right. Absolutely.
So if you love you, everybody else is a bonus.
Right.
And that energy comes out. And so you'll wonder why certain people are attracted or drawn to you.
Right. Right. Right.
Resonate. Your music resonates with them. Your craft resonates with them. And then in a digital space, you're able to now work with your avatar.
Right.
But you got to get clear on that avatar there too. You can't be throwing it out to everybody hoping that the Country Music Hall of Fame is going to invite you and all you do is hip hop.
Right.
I mean, I'm not trying to, I say that to create some pictures so that you understand psychologically, you understand metaphorically, you understand spiritually, and you understand financially. There has to be synchronicity.
Absolutely. I mean, this is just a powerful discussion, and there is a place for attacking the process, calling the institutional racism out, but on the other hand, it's incumbent upon all of us to do our internal work.
Yes.
To be the change that we want to see.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. Be the change. Be the vision. Be the dream. Be your greatest I am.
Right. I think the question that you posed earlier, where and what is the lie in your life? I think that question is so powerful because, I had to face and overcome some lies in my life. And I remember, calling my dad and crying about certain things that were happening in the workplace. And it wasn't until I faced the fact that I made the choice to accept what I was given. And when I realized that I had a role in these things that were happening, I decided to lead myself out of those situations with the help of God.
Mm-hmm.
And I led myself out of those situations. And I think the mindset piece is so powerful, because even as an artist, you know, there's other artists that have the nerve to criticize other people's gifts, when in fact, you know, there's billions of people on the planet. There's a fan for everybody.
Right.
There's a fan base for everybody. And it's really not our place to discourage and knock someone from, you know, pursuing their dream.
You're right. 1,000% right. And as I sit in what you've shared,
Mm-hmm.
and I sit in what your work is and what my current work actually is, and the bigger picture of it, I've always still come down to a singular point of origin. So the work I do with clients, the work that I do with corporations and organizations, and each time I go in and I speak, I share with them that until you get right with you, until you understand you, how in the world are you ever going to truly, honestly, and authentically lead others?
Right.
Okay. And the singular piece that everything comes back to is figuring out who you are. Who you are right now in this season of your life, of your leadership, of your business, of your opportunity. So sit down and ask yourself, who am I? And if there's any elements of who you are that you don't like, guess what? Fix it, change it, do something about it.
Right.
How about transform it? Become something new. Become an up-level version.
Right.
You know? And recently, one of my mentors, Roddy Galvez, we were in our Empowered Living call, and we're talking about the immunity to change and people not wanting to change. And I hadn't heard it before, but it seems like when something drops on you at a particular point in time, it hits differently.
Right.
And you know, I always talk about metamorphosis and the transformation and
right.
the journey of the butterfly. And so the single point that I will leave this with you and listeners is that a caterpillar was never put on this earth to die a caterpillar.
Right.
It's supposed to go through a transformation, and so shall we.
Right. Right. I think Paul, he said something, you know, when I was a child, I thought as a child, I lived as a child, but when I became grown, I put away those childish things. There's a transformation that he's speaking to there. And this transformation, accepting that transformation is a part of my life from breath to breath, moment to moment, has brought me a lot of peace and clarity.
Wow. Like I said, I am in a space and a place now in this season that my laser focus is evolving as the best version of me. Evolving as the best version of me. And when I work on me, it has impact and influence on how I serve and lead others. And that's where I'm at.
Well, that is so powerful. I know we can go on talking more about this, and we will in our various platforms, but how can people connect with you today, Dr. Deena Brown?
Absolutely. The best way to connect with me is to follow me on Instagram at Dr. Deena Speaks, DrDeena Speaks. And again, I'm on LinkedIn, but I link in with people who are aligned with me. And one of the things that you definitely want to do and to catch if you want to have more conscious conversation is to check my podcast out, Walking Through Glass, the podcast, which is available on iTunes, Google Music Play, Podbean, Spotify, and Stitcher, and soon to be iHeartRadio.
Well, that's awesome. I would definitely check out that podcast, dear listeners. And I just want to say thank you so much, Dr. Deena Brown, for coming on to the Jazz and Tech Lounge and having this intense yet productive conversation.
Thank you. It has definitely been my pleasure. Truly, truly appreciate you, all you do, all your work, and the fact that you have not placed yourself or your gifts in a box. And so your fusion of jazz and tech just isn't a wonderful model for others to know that they are bigger and they always can go bolder and they truly can walk in who they're called to be, not what someone else thinks they should be. So thank you.